Hello and welcome to a tutorial on doing a sunset landscape with watercolor with some silhouette in a desert scene. We'll start out first. I'm going to let you guys know what kind of materials I'm going to be using. So first I've got my paintbrushes. They are the Royal and Langnickel brand. They're just kind of a multimedia brush, and these are probably the main sizes I'll use. Next, I've got my watercolors. I use Art Philosophy Co. I really like their watercolor Confections. This one is called their Tropicals, and then this one is called their Decadent Pies. Next, I've got this watercolor pad. It is in a block, so it's like attached with the glue to help it to stop it warping. But this particular brand isn't a super high quality, so it tends to warp a little bit anyways and take a little extra working. But that's okay, it's still definitely usable. Next I may be using this, maybe not, a little bit of white acrylic paint. This is just a real cheap brand from any craft store or art store. I've got a blow dryer that's really handy if I need things to dry a little faster. I've got a paper towel for dabbing, and then I've also got my little cup of water. You don't need anything too big for this. So today we're going to focus on doing a landscape kind of similar to this one. This is one that I did for a mini series that I just recently finished. It was a series of 1 inch by 1 inch paintings that I did, and I did a time lapse for each one. You can find the series that I did on my Instagram at mix.art.goods. You can also find it for sale, the different prints, and there's still a few originals left at my shop, which link will be in the bio. So, to start off, you may want to just lightly draw out what you want to do. Sometimes I do, a lot of times I don't. But if you want to, I would take just a really light lead pencil, really thin, and just do like a single line of whatever your main landscape will be. And one thing you want to keep in mind is that once the water goes down over the pencil, you won't be able to erase it. So you want it to be so faint that you can barely see it, but nobody will be able to see it through the paint. Once that is all finished, I'm going to go ahead and get my sky started. So we're going to do a sunset sky. So I'm going to have some reds, probably some yellows and oranges, and then I'm going to have some faint blues at the top. You just want to get it pretty wet. This particular type of painting is called wet on wet, and a lot of times you use this for your bigger pieces in the watercolor that include your sky or your main colors. So I've got that. I don't have to go all the way down because I will have my silhouette down below. You can go all the way down if you like, but I'm not going to bother. Okay, now that I've got it all wet, I'm going to go ahead and put my first round of color in. I'm going to do a little bit of blue right now. So I'm going to use this ocean color in my tropical set. I'm just going to get it pretty wet, and I'm going to just dab it in. You want to make sure that your paper's staying fairly wet, because that's how you're going to get the real loose sky feel. So I'm going to add in a little more water as I'm going. And then I'm going to go ahead and introduce my next color. So because this is a sunset, I'm going to now include a little bit of my hibiscus color in my tropicals again. And I'm just going to start dabbing it in wherever I want it to show in my sunset. And you'll notice the sunset generally starts light towards the land because that's where the sun is, and then it'll get darker. Up here I've got the moon, so that can be kind of confusing because it looks like it should be brighter around that. But the sun is actually down below the landscape, and then that's just an early rising moon. Again, I want this to be pretty wet. I may need to dab more with my paper towel. We'll see what happens. I'm going to bring some of that color down to the bottom. Get it real deep in there. Alright, now I'm going to introduce my next color. I want this to be a really faint light color. I'm thinking I'm going to go with this Peach Cobbler from my Decadent Pies palette. We'll see how that looks in there. I am liking that. So I'm going to add that in. That's kind of representing where the most light from the sun is. So I want that kind of in the center and fanning out. I'm going to get my paper towel and dab a little bit. Got some pooling. And I'll get my Peach Cobbler going throughout. And then I want some more of my hibiscus at the top. So I'm going to dab that back through, add in a little extra color there. Alright, I need some more of my blue to mix here with my hibiscus. So I'm going to bring a little bit more down. Just make sure it drops a bit. And my goal is to get some fun kind of stretching of my paint. So it looks like maybe clouds or just interesting lines. Bring it down. Bring some more water in. And I also want to bring in a little more blue through it. At this point, some people will use salt within their paint. It's a fun agent. It just kind of pulls all the water towards it when you put it down, so then it creates kind of more of the spiking of the watercolor, so that's pretty fun. You might want to try that. If you do, you want to use a higher, bigger grain of salt. That'll do more of the trick for you. And you kind of need to play around with it to find when the best time in your painting to do it, because it really works best at a certain level of wetness. So it might take a little bit of playing around with. You might want to practice on a little scratch piece of paper first. So now what I'm trying to do is get kind of a little bit of line movement going, because sometimes you'll get kind of a line with the cloud, and that's what I would like to have. Alright, so I've got it all dry and I'm really liking how it's looking. So I think before I move on to the landscape part, I'm going to go ahead and add some white because I want to get some real like fluffy looking clouds. So I'm just going to take my white, I got my paintbrush a little bit wet to keep it in that kind of watercolor look, and then I'm just going to kind of fluff it in there. Alright, so at this point, I am going to go ahead and do my landscape. So I'm just washing my brush off quick, get all that acrylic paint off. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to grab my skinnier brush for now, just this one. And I'm going to go ahead and lightly put in where I want my landscape to go. And I'm going to do this with a dark blue. This is one of my favorites. It's called Blackberry, for my Decadent palette. And I'm going to go ahead and first just kind of label in where I'm going to put stuff. Alright, so now that I've got a pretty good feel of where I'm going to want everything, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do layer by layer. So I'm going to go from light to dark. So I want my lightest to be in the background and then my darkest to be in the foreground. So that'll be down here. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to do just my lightest background. And I have to do it dark enough so that it'll cover up the sky. And then I'll just get darker and darker as I go. Okay, now for these next layers, because this is more of already kind of the foreground, I'm going to introduce another color. So I'm going to do a hibiscus as my first layer, and then I'll go through and do some dark over it. Alright, so now I've got my next texture level, which is this one. I'm going to go ahead and do some more hibiscus through there. Alright, and now for my last level, I'm just going to do the dark, because I want to tie in this area down here now. So again, I kind of like having some lines in it, gives it some texture, but I'm just doing the one color. Alright, so now that I've got my main layers done, and I might go back in and add some detail, we'll see. But now I want to go through and start adding a few cacti and other, little plants and textures to my landscape. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to use my smallest brush, and I'm going to just get some pretty wet, but this dark blue to match this color. And I'm just going to start painting with it. Now I'm mixing a bit of my hibiscus with the blue, and I'm going to do some that are even bigger. Just keep moving up the line, bigger and bigger. Match the different layers as much as you can. Alright, and for my last level, I'm going to go ahead and do the darkest dark blue I can do, and some of the tallest ones and biggest. Alright, and the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just add in a couple birds like you see up there. Just gives it a little interest and kind of makes the black down here balanced up here. So I'm just going to dab it in a little bit of kind of a mixture of the blackberry with a teeny bit of hibiscus. And then I'm just going to start painting. I just want a few. Kind of the swoop. Got a little head, And then you want it to show the tail, where it fans out just a little bit. And then make the wings a little thicker. Alright, so there you've got your sunset with the desert landscape. Got some silhouettes, and that's it. Thanks for watching.